Gladys Aylward, Missionary. 1. Gladys Aylward was neither rich, nor well-educated, and not trained in any special skill, but Gladys was committed to the Lord and determined to follow His call. She went to China on her own, learned the language, supported herself, and became friends with the local Chinese ruler. Her ministries in China included managing an inn, inspecting girls' feet, managing orphanages, and starting churches. Gladys was an ordinary woman, but she did amazing things for the Lord. 2. Gladys was born in the early 1900s in London, England. Her family was poor, so Gladys left school at the age of 14 and began to work. One day she heard a preacher talk about dedicating one's life to the service of the Lord. As Gladys listened, she felt God calling her to be a missionary. She wanted to join the China Inland Mission Society, but she failed the exam. This did not stop Gladys. She continued to pray and trust God. Later she heard of Mrs. Lawson, a missionary lady in China. Mrs. Lawson was 73 years old and needed a younger woman to help her. Gladys was willing to go, but did not have enough money to pay for a ticket to travel by ship. This did not stop Gladys. She had just enough money for the train. After a long trip by train, boat, bus and mule, Gladys arrived in Yangchun and began her work with Mrs. Lawson. 3. The people of Yangchun did not trust these two foreign white women. It was hard for Gladys and Mrs. Lawson. But this did not stop them. They wanted to reach the people of Yangchun for Christ. They prayed to God for guidance. Yangchun was an overnight stop for mule caravans. There were no roads, so everything was carried by mules. The men who guided the mules needed a place to stay when they stopped for the night. So Mrs. Lawson decided to set up an inn for the men and the mules. When Gladys saw a mule caravan coming, she went out and took the rope of the first mule. As she led him into the yard, the other mules followed. The men had to come too. Their mules were taken care of. The men were given beds and good food. Gladys and Mrs. Lawson told Bible stories to the men while they ate. Some of the men trusted in Jesus. 4. Some years later, Mrs. Lawson fell and hurt herself. She died a few days later. Gladys was now alone in Yangchun, China. She needed to manage the inn by herself. She needed to continue to learn Chinese. She did not have friends or money. These problems did not stop Gladys. She asked God to take care of her needs. One day the Mandarin, local ruler, came to visit Gladys. He needed her help. He offered to pay Gladys if she would help him. In those days, Chinese girls were forced to wrap their feet very tightly. This kept their feet very small and they could not walk very well. The Chinese government wanted to change this tradition. It made a law that families could not do this to their little girls. The Mandarin needed someone to go to each house to look at the girls' feet and to tell the parents not to wrap the feet. The Mandarin needed a woman with big feet who could walk easily. He needed Gladys. Gladys agreed to do this. Now she could visit many Chinese homes. She made friends with the families and shared God's love. 5. There were many children begging on the street. They were orphans who did not have parents or homes. Gladys invited them to live in her home. After a few years she had over 100 orphans living with her. When the Japanese attacked China and came to Yangchun, Gladys ran away with her children. It took 12 days to cross the mountains to safety. It was a very hard trip, but they all made it safely. 6. When they got to the new city, Gladys became very sick. But even this did not stop Gladys. When she got better, She shared God's love with the people in the new city and organized Christian fellowships. 7. When the Communists took over China, Gladys had to leave China. She returned to London, but her heart was with the Chinese people. Even the Communists did not stop Gladys. She went to Formosa, now Taiwan, and started orphanages there. In 1970, at the age of 68, Gladys died in Taiwan. Gladys Aylward never stopped following her call to serve God among the Chinese people.